The Stanley number 46. It is a loved and hated tool with a really interesting history. Let's dive in. Justice A. Traut is a name you should know. He is the king of American tool patents, and he has over 145 patents in the tool world. Most of his patents were done for Stanley, and the 45 is one of them. The basic on this was a Justice A. Traut design. And he also went on to do the 46, and then the 47, and a few others along the way. If you work in a hand tool shop, a lot of the tools you use have a Justice A. Traut patent on them. The reason I bring it up is that of all of the patents he did, the Stanley 46 is kind of viewed as his baby. This is the plane that he really went into. And it's kind of a fun one. Everyone knows about the 45, and the 46 looks really similar, but the big difference is that the iron is skewed. If you look at it from here, you can realize it doesn't go flat across the plane, it comes back at an odd angle. This means you can't use all of the irons for the 45 and 55, you have to use the specific ones that are designed for the 46. That would seem like a huge downside to it, but once you understand that if you wanted to use a 45 iron, you'd go buy a 45, what does the 46 do with that skewed iron do that the 45 won't? And the one big difference is cross-grain situations. Yes, the 45 does have knickers on there and it will cut cross-grain, but if you ever tried it, it just doesn't leave it really clean and it's just kind of rattly. If you skew the iron and you go at an angle, you actually get a cleaner cut when going cross-grain. And this one has even better spurs that are actually easier to work with. Let's take a closer look at it. Now, this is an early model of it, and the early ones didn't have a separate fence. They actually had a second skate with a fence attached to it. This fence could be removed. Now, this is not an original one. The original ones were actually made out of metal, but most of them are broken or missing, and it's very, very hard to find an old one that actually has that fence built onto the second skate. So I just got a piece of wood, put a couple screws in there, and with the keyholes, it just pops into place. The later models actually came with a separate fence, so you would have the second skate and the fence as well as the main body. One of the problems with the 45 and 55 are these knickers here are really hard to get into. That screw is tiny, and you need a very specific screwdriver to get in there, and a lot of times they freeze up on you, and they're just hard to sharpen. With the 46, they are a much larger design on there, and the screw on the back is a lot larger. You can get a regular screwdriver in here. When you loosen it up, they come out pretty easily, and because they're larger, they're actually easier to sharpen. To sharpen them, I put them with the flat side down, put my finger on there and just run them around the plate. Sometimes they pop out, sometimes they run smoothly, doesn't take much. Slide over the next one and continue on. If I need to do the bevel, I bring them over and put them into a small pair of vice grips, and this allows me to hold on to them and sharpen that bevel, just like I would a scrub plane iron. And then to put them back together, the screw and iron are large enough that they just slot together really easily. There's also a decent amount of play in that screw so that you can sharpen quite a bit of material off of these and they last for a long time. The main body also has a depth stop on here you can slide up and down. And then to insert the iron, it uses the same mechanism as the old 45s. You slide in there and you crank down on this screw. And as you tighten down on the thumb screw, it pulls the bolt into place and locks the iron down in, and it holds it really well. Unfortunately, the spacing of the two bars is different from the 45, which is different from the 55, so you can't use a fence from one of the other combination planes on the 46. The 46 is basically just grooving, or because it's cross-grained, it would be called a dado. You can use it to do rabbets or philisters, but it does also come with a tonguing iron. And this works okay, but you don't really need to make very many cross-grained tongues. And when you do, this doesn't work very well because it doesn't have a spur on the inside of the teeth. It just has it on the outside. So you kind of get a ragged edge when it goes cross-grained in between the teeth. Generally, the irons are actually hammer adjusted because there is no adjusting mechanism on there. For cross-grained tongue and groove, it's not great. It's pretty good down the sides, but the tongue is a bit of a mess because there are no spurs in there. Generally, when cutting a dado, which is the most common thing, you actually take the fence off, which is why these are often missing. Then you grab a scrap piece of wood and you lock it down wherever you want your dado cut to be. The plane then rides up against that and makes the cut. And you're left with a relatively clean dado with a nice smooth bottom on it. Pretty quick and easy. Stanley sold quite a few of them, but not as many as the 45, because honestly, the 45 can do cross-grain dado work. So you don't really need one of these, but if you're doing a lot of it, this is really kind of useful and fun. The problem is most of the time you're going to find these, they don't come with the fence, and they don't come with the irons, and you're going to have one iron in there, which was the last one they used, usually a 1/4 inch. They are fun planes, they're a little finicky to set up, but so is any combination plane. Usually at this point, the next question is, how exactly do you sharpen those skewed irons? And the answer is just like any other iron or chisel, sharpen it. I put it down and I feel, where's the bevel on it? And I got right about there. I'm just gonna do the same thing, back and forth, holding it down. It is sometimes harder to find a jig that will do it because not all jigs can run the skew, but if you can freehand, then you can sharpen them. They are very easy to sharpen because they're just that standard bevel and back. Keeping them at the right angle is relatively easy. And that angle is actually about 22 degrees to the side. Give or take a degree and you'll be perfectly fine. If you see that it's slightly off angle, then next time you sharpen it, just put a little bit more weight on the side you want to take off more material and it will bring it back into where it needs to be. It is a kind of interesting plane and a lot of fun to play with. And like most tools in the shop, it's not one you really need unless you're doing a lot of one particular task. But if you are, then it might be one worth getting. Otherwise, it's always good to have one around because they're a lot of fun to play with. They did change quite a bit over time, and so there were other things that were added, much like the 45 and 55, such as the other fence and adjusters and things that made them a little bit easier to use. They added slowly over time. In the beginning, they had all sorts of cool scroll work on there, and that slowly disappeared over time, just like it did with the 45. As to price, they're kind of all over the place. Most of the time, you're going to get them with the body and one iron and missing the fence, and in that case, you're usually going to be spending 30 bucks or so. They're relatively affordable. However, once you get one with a fence, if you get one with a full set of irons, then the price goes up. And honestly, the irons are where the price is. These things are hard to find and very expensive. A full set of those may run you $150, $200, $300 depending upon their condition in the case. So if you're looking to buy one, you've got a lot of options, but you have to figure out how much do you actually want to spend on it, which is kind of the answer for a lot of tools in the shop. So if you have any questions on this or things that I missed, things I could have talked about, please let me know. I could have gone a lot more into it, and there's lots of fun little intricacies to it that are enjoyable, but this is a fun tool. And if you do have any other thoughts on it, throw those down below. Thank you, that helps out the channel. Anytime you like, comment, share, subscribe, you know how it works. It helps us out. Thank you. But if you really want to be amazing and join these people over here, those are some of the patrons on Patreon. And between patrons and members, you guys support this channel, and without you, we would not be here. So thank you for that. If you'd like to find out more, you know what to do. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time. Interestingly enough, just to say Traut made the 45 and the 46, and he didn't realize just how close, but it was someone else that patented the 42. The answer to life, the universe, and everything.